What can you show me that my heart don't know already? We make our own sense. You're qualified in me. What can you show me that my heart don't know already? We make our own sense, and you're qualified in me.
Okay. Welcome, boxers, to episode 3 of Life in the Box. I have one question for you. Are you ready? Because I don't think you're ready. When Dan Mason suggested the topic for this episode, I have to admit, my stomach curled a little bit. When this question is asked, almost all finance managers see red. As someone who left the box only a very short time ago, I have struggled to put my obvious bias aside when trying to address the question put forth. I also racked my brain on how to structure this interview so that the bias didn't overtake the purpose. I had to step outside of our normal structure of interviewing only dealership employees because I wanted to get as close to an unbiased answer as I could. I toyed with the idea of getting 2 people at the same time on the show with opposing views, but that proved difficult. So we're going to make this a 2-part series, episode 3A and 3B. The question we're going to attempt to answer is, should sales and finance be combined into one role? I'm your host, Chris Cochran, and while I have my own strong opinions on this subject, I will try to keep them from seeping out over the next 20 or 30 minutes. Now, our guest in episode 3A is Tom Wilson. Tom has been a lifelong industry advocate for dealers and for F&I in particular. He appeared numerous times at the annual F&I Industry Summit in Las Vegas as a panelist, moderator, and platform speaker, in addition to writing articles for the F&I and Showroom magazine. He currently works for Hyundai Capital Insurance as a senior district manager for Virginia, Maryland, and West Virginia. Tom has had a successful 25-year background in the automotive industry and has held numerous positions in the retail side, such as GSM, sales manager, F&I director, and multi-store platform director. Tom remains a committed believer in helping dealers achieve their goals and approaches every dealer with the same enthusiasm and philosophy. Tom's experience in variable and fixed ops gives him a depth of knowledge of how a dealer operates and allows him to show dealers how to maximize their profits and CSI by partnering with HCA and taking advantage of all the available programs. On a personal note, Tom's been a licensed pilot for over 40 years. He's owned a Cessna 172 and a Beechcraft V35 Bonanza, and as he recently said, I don't mind flying coast to coast, but I do mind being in the back of the plane. I'd rather be up front. Let's all welcome Tom Wilson to Life in the Box. Welcome, Tom.
Well, good morning, Chris. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. It's like an interesting topic we have queued up.
Oh, yeah, I'm excited about this one. This should be fun. If you could, before we get started, though, would you mind just kind of telling the people how you got started in the automotive industry?
Yeah, I got started on a dare, and the way that happened was I took a vacation from my day job, and I kept telling everybody, I'm going to go over there across the street and sell cars. And they laughed. They said, yeah, right, go ahead. So I did. So I got a job selling cars and realized that what I had made in 2 weeks was more than I had made in a month at my regular job profession that I had been in for about 18 years. So I basically never looked back, stayed in the car business from that day forward, and I've always enjoyed it.
Excellent. I gave the listeners a brief bio on your background and where you come from. Again, to repeat, the topic for today is whether or not we should combine sales and finance into one role. I know where I stand. I think I know where you stand. But I had put a poll on the Ethical F&I Facebook page asking a very simple question: should sales and finance be combined into one role? And there were 173 responses from people on that group, and all but 2 of them were a definitive no. It's not surprising. Obviously, no finance manager in their right mind would admit that their role could be done by a salesperson just as effectively. But I would like to get your take on it. So I guess my first question for you is not should it be combined, but can sales and finance be combined and have success?
Well, here's my take on this, and it may be a roundabout way for me to get back to my answer, but I have the unique perspective of working with 44 different dealers, and that stretches across 3 states. So, that being said, prior to my visits and sitting down with the dealer or general manager or ownership group of the dealer, I look at internal reporting documents, which shows me pretty much every aspect of the finances of the store. So when I look at variable operations, that obviously splits into 2 parts, sales and F&I. So the sales people on new car side, for example, the dealer who loses the least amount of money is the winner. And then you have to look to the F&I. Okay, if you're going to lose X amount of dollars per copy up front, where are you making it back? And then that's where you start looking into the F&I numbers and say, okay, this store can improve, or this store is good, or whatever. So that being said, blending the two of them together, you're trying to blend together oil and water, which don't normally mix. Now, you can get oil and water to mix with a lot of agitation, and eventually comes out to be a solution that is called emulsion, and it's neither oil nor water. So putting sales and F&I together, you're going to end up with one thing that is not one or the other. Now, let's look at what the role of the salespeople play in the store. And I've, again, cover 3 different states, from metro areas to rural areas. And the salespeople, the good ones, if they're not busy with a customer, they're on the phone, they're answering e-leads, they're trying to prospect business. So their primary function is to not just serve the customer that they're with, but to help generate new business. Now, once they've generated that business, brought the customer and sold the car, I have not talked to a lot of salespeople that are that interested in having to go through additional paperwork, like signing a bank contract, trying to sell a service contract, sell maintenance, sell whatever the other ancillary products are. They're interested in selling the car. So when you start looking at that, and then if anybody out there has looked at a delivery checklist lately from the manufacturer, these cars come with more buttons and more knobs and more things, to the point where the driver is almost secondary. And the salesperson has to be knowledgeable in all of the technical aspects of the vehicle so he can properly deliver it, so you have, again, high CSI. And CSI is being driven by the factories, and it kind of permeates everything. So blending the sales together with finance, I'm against it, and I'm against it for the reason that I see stores that are trying it have seen a reduction in profit. Where's it coming back to me?
Right.
So, and F&I, the skill sets between the two are really different. I have an F&I manager that's 2.5 weeks in position. He's doing an excellent job, but he came off of the sales desk at a different store and into F&I. His motivation for doing so is for his future career. He said, as I progress through where I want to go, I can't supervise or help F&I if I don't know F&I. And I said, so what's your impression so far? He said, when I was a sales manager, I'd go out, shake a hand, slap him on the back, bring him a cup of coffee, bottle of water, and congratulations on your new car. He said, that's how it was closed. He said, that same person gets in this office, and he just looked at me and shook his head, and he said, I had never had any idea that it was this hard to get people to buy things in this office. So I said, it's a different skill set.
Absolutely.
He absolutely agreed.
It seems to me like the dealers who are trying to implement this are doing it to try to fix a problem. The problem that I would say most consumers have or hate about the buying of a vehicle, the biggest complaint would likely be time. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but I know when I was in the box and I would always ask customers, how's everything going? How's the process been up to this point? And even if they said great, there was always a but, and it was great, but I've been here for 3.5 hours. I've been here for 4 hours. I've been here for 2. It didn't matter. I've been here for an hour and a half. But in that consumer's mind, there was always a but, no matter how good the process was, and it was time. And it seems like the dealers who are implementing this are fixated on shortening the overall time it takes to purchase a vehicle. So do you think that this is a process that would allow the time it takes to go down? Is it going to increase the time it takes, or does it not make a difference?
Well, I think that time is a valid reason or valid concern, but the dealers need to look internally to see what has caused a lengthening of the sales process. And it could very well be that there's a lot of time spent in negotiation, or a lot of time spent reviewing the features and the benefits of the vehicle itself. There may be a lot of things going on the sales floor that will give them that 2.5 to 3 hour window. The expectations of the consumer are that a lot like a red box. I walk up, I swipe my card, I push a button, I get my movie, and I walk away. Buying a car is not like that. Then we get into the F&I office and look at the amount of legal paperwork that we have to disclose. So there's a lot of disclosures that are required. There's a lot of opportunities in there for people to choose solutions to problems that they may not have already, that they may not know they have. So I think time could be a factor in it, but I don't think that a hybrid or a blended sales F&I is going to shorten that period of time, because somebody's still got to print the paperwork. Somebody still has to do all the disclosures. Somebody still has to present the back-end products. And I think just looking at it short-sightedly, saying, okay, I can save time by doing this, they're finding out that the process really isn't saving any time.
I know when I was in finance, I mean, I would hear the time complaint all the time, and the time was always taken up prior to coming into finance. Finance didn't take all that much as far as a percentage-wise of the time it takes to actually buy the car, unless you're dealing with some credit issues or something like that. Right. But the typical process of buying a car most of the time is in finding the vehicle, test driving the vehicle, negotiating the sale price, the back and forth on the sales floor. And then once finance gets the deal, in my opinion, or in my experience, about 45 minutes maybe once we get the deal to get the customer rolling. Again, assuming there's no credit issue. So I would agree. I mean, I don't know where you're going to save time by combining the process. There's a TO between sales and finance that takes 30 seconds, I guess. So, I mean, you can save a little time there. But outside of that, now I do want to kind of talk about one of the bigger names in the dealer world that seems to be putting the strategy into place. I know it's Sonic Automotive. They have their One Sonic, One Experience. I know they've rolled it out in North Carolina, I believe, and they've got a used car operation going on in Colorado that they're claiming they're having success. I do try to address bias. Sonic's a publicly traded company. I don't expect them to admit that their attempt to change the car buying is a failure. They wouldn't say that, so, or at least not as successful as they had hoped. But they do claim that their profit per vehicle in finance is up about 40% from what they had expected it to be at this used car location. And in a big organization like that, I'd like to know what your thoughts are with a company that big rolling out this process and claiming to have success with it, when we would say that most people who are addressing this concern say that you can't.
Yeah, I think with a large publicly traded company, they're going to have to basically come to the table and disclose everything that they're doing and why and how. As far as their year-over-year sales numbers, I don't have anything in front of me, but my understanding from talking with a general manager yesterday was that their year-over-year sales numbers are down. So whether
correct,
that's just indicative of the economy or the fact that everybody's looking at the same thing, I don't know what to chalk it up to. But I am familiar with their used car stores in Colorado. When I was out there, I actually got in to tour one of them. Kind of a Best Buy type environment when you walk into it. Very consumer friendly as far as the profits go. Again, I obviously couldn't get any information out of the manager at the time what the profits looked like, but it was a well-run operation. But again, when you're dealing with used cars, then you're away from the mandates of the factory of saying you're going to have this CSI and that CSI, and here's your invoice, and by the way, we need your sales professionals to go online, get certified, and they need to fill out this 16-page checklist that goes through everything in the car and then make sure that's on file. So, I mean, we're looking at new versus used. So, obviously, with used, you do have some leniency and some latitude on that. But the overall profit picture of a dealer that carries a brand, most of these dealers, as we know, are reinsured somewhere. Unless you've got a real low volume dealership that don't qualify for any type of that type of a program. Most of these dealers are reinsured. So when they're looking at their forecasting and they're saying, okay, I want to go to a blended hybrid process. I want one person, one touch. I want them to do it all. Here's my forecast. So you actually have to go back and say, what have I historically done? What am I expecting? are my expectations that I will maintain the same type of contributions into my CFC or my NCFC? Do I expect my penetration levels to fall, to grow? What? So, and there's not a lot of hard evidence out there as to what really does happen. I mean, you've got a few groups crowing about it, and then you've got others that very quietly go back to the way they were doing things before.
I would expect that a change like this initially, most dealers who are undergoing this change in the beginning would expect their F&I profits per vehicle to drop. Anytime you change a process like that, you've got bugs you got to work out, so they expect it to drop. But I'm wondering if in the long run they expect to make it up in volume. Unfortunately, Sonic seems to be going the other way this year. They did claim that their gross sales numbers have gone down, but they're saying their profit and the finance has gone up. But I'm wondering if, as customers, I'm guessing they're thinking that as customers become aware of this new way to buy a car and like it and enjoy it more, that they'll generate more volume in the long run, and will make up for the lost profit of having a separate finance department. Do you think maybe they're thinking along those lines, or
they could very well be? But if you sit back and take a checklist out and say, here's my staff, here's how many people I need to do the job. So if you're running a staff of, let's say, 30 salespeople, and you have 3 finance offices staffed all the time, that's probably about right. So if you have those same 30 people who are now doing a half sales, half F&I job, you're still going to need to have somebody qualified to negotiate with the lenders to get the deals bought. You're going to have somebody available to print the paperwork, somebody available to check to make sure everything is correct. And then you have to take whatever monies you think you're saving in the F&I office and turn right around and dedicate that to a training budget, because I don't have a whole lot of people that I could put my thumb on that say, this person could do that or this person couldn't do that. And again, with a variety of different levels of skill in the stores, look around the stores. I mean, any one of the people listening, take a look around, or maybe in your own store, roll through the names in your head. Who do I have on my floor that I deal with every day that could do this job and do it correctly and do it compliant and legally and ethically and honestly, etc.? And then who are the players that are in my store that couldn't do that, no matter what you gave them? They may sell a lot of cars, but are they going to be that detail-oriented to be able to turn right around, put on the different hat, now upsell from what they've just sold and get the product sold? So I don't see a lot of it. I mean, I just don't see it happening. This hybrid, the time for that may have come and gone, because with each new model release, there are quantum leaps in technology. I mean, we used to have mechanics in the back. Now we have technicians. They used to be able to open a hood and listen to the engine and figure out what's going on. Now they plug in underneath the dashboard somewhere. So the level of technology that the consumer demands in their car is now got back to the person who's going to teach me how to use all this. And maybe now we've got a lot of time that we have to dedicate to the delivery process, as opposed to trying to flex the F&I process into the middle of it all.
I think you touched on a point there where if a dealer's doing this from a money-saving standpoint, I mean, I just don't, like you just explained, I don't see the justification when, like you said, you still need somebody a document specialist, as one of the, I think it was Greg Miller's Toyota store in San Diego, who's got a similar strategy. The way that he answered the compliance issues was to hire a document specialist to audit every deal for compliance. So, you've got an extra expense there. You're probably going to have to hire more salespeople. Yeah, that would make sense. Like you had explained, you're going to pay for more training. So from a money-saving standpoint, I don't see the benefits of it, especially when I'm expecting that F&I profits are going to go down as well.
Part of it, hiring a document specialist to audit the deals after they're done to ensure compliance, is a lot like running in after the battle's been lost and bayoneting the wounded. I mean, you need to be proactive on compliance. There are probably not a lot of people who have had to sit down and do paperwork for a deal with one of the higher ups of the CFPB. That was my little joy back in June. One of the CFPB, and again, I was working a store very close to D.C., so one of the guys from the CFPB decided to come in and buy a car. And everybody was all beside themselves. I said, just give me the deal. So his paperwork was disclosed the same way everything else was. All of the disclosures were signed. Everything was explained to the nth degree, as is common with every single customer. So does a non-professional F&I manager have that ability to sit down with that level of individual and explain what needs to be explained and answer the questions that he was asking, which were obviously set up questions, but they were answered completely. So, a compliance specialist after the fact, again, you got to put your money up front and start training these people all the way down the line to make sure that they don't say the wrong thing.
I agree. I was talking to somebody who was also not for this process of combining the two roles, and he said it's kind of like taking Gronkowski of the Patriots and having him play quarterback because it's going to save yourself a little bit of money. Problem is, you're not going to win any games. It just doesn't make sense. The other interesting thing that I had found when I did this poll on the Facebook page, I had done a second poll on a different Facebook page that's dedicated to salespeople as opposed to finance managers. And surprisingly, I didn't get quite as many responses. I think it was about 75 or 80 responses, but we were about 3-1 of no's to yeses. So we actually had about 20 people in that group say, yes, you can combine them. So like I said, on a finance manager's page, I obviously expect there to be some bias. Nobody's going to want to offer up their job to a salesperson. But even on a salesperson's page, 75% of people who would be offered that position are saying, I don't want it. I'm good. I'd rather let the professionals handle it. So that I thought that was pretty interesting.
Again, they're the sales professionals, and there's a few in every store. Those are the folks that are on the phones when they're not in front of a customer. They're answering the e-leads. They're sending the emails. They're following up. They're doing whatever they can to proactively get that customer in the door. And I don't think that they really want to start wearing another hat. It's like, well, my customer's back for an oil change. I guess I got to go change the oil now. No, let's leave that to professional technicians in the back to get that done.
So I don't like putting people on the spot, but I'm going to do it anyways. We obviously know your opinion on the subject, and I think that I would second that opinion. But I have to ask, if you were to have to give an explanation on how it could be effective and could be implemented with success, what would be the strategy for implementing this process if you were in a store, one of your 44 stores that's running this process, and they said, listen, we need to make this work. How do we make this work? What would be your advice on how to do it if it needed to be done?
Well, I think you have to start by opening your wallet and say, this is where I want this is what I want my store to look like a year from now. And you have to start intensely training people on what is expected, what the process is, and it's not something that they can do internally. They're going to have to go out and get some big guns to come in, training companies, send people out for training. I mean, there's some tried and true processes that are being used in the industry, which we've used for a lot of years, and they're very successful. And because the training companies have successfully implemented those in the F&I offices, it is quite possible to take a similar type training and do it with a salesperson. But then your people have to buy in on it too. You're not going to walk into the showroom one day and say, okay, all you guys selling cars? Guess what? You get to do F&I as well. So you're going to have to get the buy-in from your staff. You're going to have to allocate funds for training. And training is not just a one-time event. It's a process.
Sure, absolutely.
So that has to be adhered to by all levels of management, not just the GM or not just the owner. You have to have all levels of management. And then you're going to have to sit back and restructure your organization to see what it looks like. And is it going to be efficient? And ultimately, is your customer going to buy it? I mean, do they buy the process? Is it going to work the way it's supposed to? And yes, you're going to have some hiccups along the way, but I think the bigger issue is, allocate a training budget, go out there and surround yourself with people who are going to train your people to your level of standards.
And I think your hiring
follow-up is a big issue.
Your hiring process is going to be a little different. Typically, salespeople, no experience necessary, right out of high school. I mean, and nothing wrong with that, but you're going to need to expect more from new hires if you're going to be having them doing finance, handling legal issues and compliance issues. So you're going to have to really try to find the cream of the crop when it comes to hiring your employees.
Well, and then that goes back, that dovetails into the payroll. And a lot of people who are being hired in stores today, a lot of salespeople are being paid pretty much a bare minimum, and they're paid a production bonus on the number of cars that they sell. When I started selling cars, we didn't have the internet. Yes, I know I've been accused of selling wagons to attach to horses, but once horses were put back out in the barnyard, we did start selling cars. But we sold on gross. We had to build the value of the vehicle. We had to make sure that the customer just fell in love with it. And we held gross because that's how we got paid. Not a lot of salespeople today are paid on gross. They're paid on production.
Yep, volume,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, volume. So now where do you go with when you start throwing F&I products into it? So, and again, looking at the actual docs store, the actual financial statements of the stores, there's not a lot of stores out there that are actually making a gross profit on the front end sales of the new cars. It has to come from somewhere, and it is coming from F&I. So F&I at this point is more crucial than it's ever been because everybody's on a race to the bottom.
Now, let me ask you this. As a consumer, if you take off I've been in the auto industry for 25 years hat, and think about being a consumer, would you rather purchase a vehicle and go through the entire process, start to finish, with one person? Or do you think the transition from sales to finance is better for you as a consumer?
Depending on the consumer, I leased a Highline vehicle, I want to say 14 years ago. And it was all done, the salesperson took care of getting my signatures on all of the paperwork, and it was all done with one person. The only problem was when I was reviewing the documents that my name was misspelled on one of them. Well, of course, if it's misspelled on one of them, it's misspelled on all of them. So he had to pick up all of the documents, walk over to the next building, left me sitting there with a cup of coffee, and came back about 20 minutes later with all brand new documents. Then we proceeded to go through the documents again, and I said that payoff for the trade is incorrect. And they basically had missed it by $2,000, which was $2,000 in my favor. Back he went again to get all the new documents reprinted, so on and so forth. And realistically, I just kind of shook my head, and I'm thinking, now what? So from a consumer standpoint, I think I would have rather have gone into the finance office, had him review the figures with me before anything was printed, review it for accuracy, review it for the numbers that I agreed to, and then print the paperwork one time, let me go. A lot of people, when we have credit issues, are not comfortable talking about credit in an open environment. They would rather have a professional like us discuss their credit issues. What can we do? Here's what the proposals are from the lenders, and do that in private. Not everybody today has absolutely stellar credit. We've not had the best economy in the past few years, and there's a lot of debt out there, and there's a lot of people that are struggling. So, talking to one of my stores yesterday, he said, yeah, we had 18 deals on Saturday. Only 3 of them hit the road because the other 15 went down in credit. I said, wow. So it's out there. So I think the customers would probably continue to do the process the way they already know how it works. And we can do refinements along the way. I mean, there's better ways to turn a customer to F&I. There's better processes to disseminate the information to them, and that's a discussion for a whole other day. But I think we can continue with the refinements without throwing out the baby with the bathwater and starting all over again.
Well, speaking of conversations for another day, before I let people off the show, I always ask them to give me the topic for the next show. So I think we covered a lot of good stuff here. You've been an excellent guest, given some great insight on this dilemma that I don't know why we face it, but we do. So I want to thank you for that, but I do need to know from you what you want us to talk about on episode number 4.
Oh, I would maybe talk about something near and dear to my heart and step into it with technology in F&I. I think there are some very good advancements we've made. I think there are some issues surrounding some of the current offerings that we'd like to get addressed. But maybe, technology.
Technology. Excellent. Well, Tom, again, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day. I know it's the last week of the month, and you've got a lot of work to do. So I appreciate you being here on Life in the Box. And I know we've known each other for about 5 years now. You've been a big help to me in my growth in the industry. So thank you for that as well. And until next time, man, we'll be in touch.
All right.
Well, Boxers, what do you think? Today, Tom Wilson gave us his view on the idea of combining sales and finance into one role. But Tom is not the only voice in the industry. We need to hear the other side of the story. So in part 2 of episode 3, we will speak with someone who's been working this process for several years and get his take on how it works or doesn't work. Also, remember that in episode 4, thanks to Tom Wilson, we will be discussing technology in the finance office, specifically the use of electronic menus. If you'd like to be a guest on Life in the Box, please reach out to me. I do want to hear from you. You can email me at chris@themcdavidgroup.com. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram by searching @LifeInTheBox33. You can also find me on Facebook as well as LinkedIn. Until next time, I'm your host, Chris Cochran, and thank you again for listening to Life in the Box.